Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Brew channel. If this is your first time joining us, thank you. If you're coming back to see us, thanks for visiting us again. So today is going to be the first of a series of videos where we will talk about the hardware that will be used on this channel to brew coffee, tea, or infusion beverages. Now they come in a couple of different types and varieties. I'll make sure that any of the hardware that we detail in these videos will have a link in the description below so that you'll know exactly what we're using. And if it's something that interests you or that you're thinking, hey, I might want to try this to brew my next cup, you'll have that information there at your disposal. So today we're going to be talking about the French press and we're going to be talking about the AeroPress. Now what you can expect from this particular video, as with all of the hardware videos, is that we'll do a quick breakdown of what each of these components is comprised of. I'll make sure that we open them up so you know what to expect when you see each one of these devices. And then I'll do a demonstration on how I'm actually going to be brewing things so that you can see what it is that I am doing. And if it's something that you're unfamiliar with, feel free to mirror it. But if it's something that you are familiar with and you see me doing something wrong, I'm not above being called out. By all means, drop a comment below and say, hey man, I think there's a better way of doing it. But when you do so, please do it with respect. We're building a community here, okay? So as we get into it and as we get started, I do want to let you know a couple of other things that I will be talking about with all of the devices. I want to make sure that I highlight, in my opinion, what's easy to clean, what's going to take more time or less time to actually use and or brew with. And then I'll give kind of my personal opinions on what I've had success in getting great flavor out of. So to start this, we're going to go to the French press. So here I have a stainless steel French press. And what I really love about this particular press is that because it's metal, it's both really easy to clean, but it also has this really cool double wall insulation. So I'm hoping that you can see that. There you go. And so it keeps your drink warm for a pretty decent amount of time. I've actually brewed in this pretty often, and what I find is that if I start a brew in the morning, it tends to hold its heat until early afternoon. So I really like that about the French press. This particular press breaks down really easy. So as you can see, you have this element inside of here. This is your actual pressing mechanism. I'll take that apart and I'll set that down for a moment. And what I love about this is that this breaks into 4 parts. Now, why is that great? One, I'm actually getting really great filtration because there's 2 center filters right here, 2 mesh filters, and they're really fine mesh. So I love that. Sandwiched in between the 2 main components that handle the pressing. So this actually goes on the top, and this particular component goes on the bottom. Looks a bit like a peace sign, I guess you could say. And then you just kind of sandwich these 2 components here in between the 2. And then you can essentially just screw it back in. Now, what I really love about this is that it makes it really easy to clean. Now, one of the things that I found is for some other French presses don't have it where you can remove this component. And so what ends up happening is you either have to like really get in there with like a little brush or something to get the extra coffee grounds out. I love that this breaks down so that I can get all the grounds out of it as I get ready to go from one potential coffee brand or flavor profile to another. I don't want to cross-contaminate my coffees. And so in order to make sure that I'm not doing that, I break this thing down and I make sure that I clean it pretty thoroughly before I get into my next coffee. The other thing that I really love is that, and this may seem kind of rudimentary to most, but I love that there's this arrow on the top. So I'm going to press this down. There's this arrow on the top of the lid, and hopefully you can see that. So what I love about that arrow is that it actually tells me where is the opening on the inside, because it's not something you can necessarily just see from it. So you can kind of do a pour without worrying about whether or not you're pouring through something that might be a little more enclosed, therefore causing more of a mess, or just kind of messing up how it goes into your cup or mug. So I love that about this particular version of the French press. I love the size of this because it allows me to get about 4 cups of coffee out of it, which is great. And when I say cups, I mean 8 ounces, right? So if I have a mug that's 16, then I'm getting 2 mugs. And that's kind of my cap. That's kind of my daily limit. But I love that I can get that much out of this device. I can prepare the coffee one time in the morning. Double wall insulation keeps it warm for a while, and I can go back and continue to get a warm coffee throughout the day as I see fit. And so this particular French press, I'm a huge fan of. It's also really quick to make coffee in it. Because there's not a ton of steps. There's not a lot of extra things that you need to do. Honestly, you spend more of your time waiting on the water to boil than you do the other components of this. And we'll talk about that when I actually demonstrate how you use this particular device for those of you who are new to this. If you're true to this, all good. And if you see me doing something and you have a hint, a tip, a technique, please, by all means, let me know. Drop a comment below. I'm super open to making sure that I'm doing this the best way possible with as many different methods and methodologies as possible. So the other press that we're going to talk about is the AeroPress. And this is a pretty cool device. So I'm going to give the camera some time to catch up to the awesomeness of this device. As you can see on there, it actually has numbers. So those gold foil numbers indicate, or they should indicate, like cup or quantity. This particular device is very cool. In my opinion, it breaks apart really simply. You have this thing that's a bit like a plunger, right? You have kind of your main tube where your actual coffee sits. And then you have this bottom cap. And what I am using is a really cool stainless steel mesh filter. Let's see if it can focus. Cool. What I love about the mesh filter is that I'm not continuously throwing out paper filters. Again, paper is biodegradable, so it's not a huge deal. It's not like using a plastic cup that you may use on a more contemporary machine. However, I feel a little bit better about not continuously throwing something out, but it is an option. The other cool thing about the paper filter is that because it is disposable, it gives you the ability to not necessarily cross-contaminate. But I will say this particular mesh filter, this metal mesh filter, does a great job of not cross-contaminating because it's very, very easy to clean. And so you just take a little sponge to it, and you just use your traditional dish soap, and it allows you to kind of get the residue off, and it doesn't hold on to the coffee like of course the paper does. So if you're a person that likes to bounce between different blends or different flavor profiles or different coffee types, the mesh filter is probably going to be the best option for you. And again, this really fine mesh filter is fantastic for that. Now, the AeroPress, you're going to put it back together. And when we take a look at the brewing methods, actually, I'm going to take this back off because, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to show you right quick what my brewing method is. Without, of course, putting the coffee in it. And then we're going to take a look at me actually brewing coffee using this device. So what I like to use is the inverted method. And so essentially what that means is I take the plunger that has this like silicone tip, and I like to take it all the way up to the amount of coffee that I would like to get out of my AeroPress. So in this particular case, I have it lined up with the number 4, which should indicate around 4 servings from this particular device. I know I said cups before, not necessarily cups. I want to set proper expectations. It's 4 servings. And so I have it set here, and then I put it on the table. I would drop in my coffee, and then I would give it a nice little tap to make sure that it's evenly there. Please, please, please make sure that your plunging device, the part that holds the liquid in, is actually fully sealed. The last thing you want to do is have it askew or not in there correctly, and then the water comes out, and this is typically boiling hot water or near boiling hot water. So this is not something that you want to get on your hand or that you want to get on a table or something like that if you don't have to. It's better to avoid the mess. So make sure that it's in there securely and evenly. Once it is, then you can drop your coffee in. This, I think, comes with some type of little spatula, but if you don't have one of those, just use a little teaspoon or a tablespoon, perfectly fine. And you'll want to make sure that you get everything spread out evenly. Then you'll want to pour your water in. Carefully, you don't want to spill any outside because, again, this water is hot. But I like to pour a little bit in first, do a little stir, and then I'll go back in and add more. But I like to do the inverted method. So we're going to go into more detail about what that looks like as I demonstrate each of these devices here in a moment. But these are the two push devices. And we'll dig more into why they're push or press devices. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the French press and the process that I use for generating coffee in the French press. Take a look. All right, so as you can see, I already have my grounds ready to go. I've taken my whole beans and I've ground them up. You don't typically want to go beyond a medium grind in this device. A coarse grind is ideal, but a medium grind is okay. And the reason that you don't want to go beyond that is because of the filtration. You want to make sure that you're able to filter all of that out, but you also want to make sure that the infusion of the coffee with the water is complete. And so in order to do that, you want to, proceed cautiously with the type of grind that you're using. Now, once I've got my grinds and I'm ready to go, I'll typically pour them right into the French press. And then once they're in there, I like to settle them just a bit. Nothing too crazy, but just a little shake back and forth to make sure that things are level. And all of that has to do with how easy it's going to be for the water to contact every grind that's in there. Now, once I've got those in there, I will take the water, I'll pour it in on top of that. Again, being careful because the water is hot, but it doesn't take anything too elaborate or too delicate. There's not a specific process. In fact, I typically use a traditional kettle as opposed to a gooseneck kettle. If you're not sure of the difference between those two, hang out. Make sure you click the subscribe button, hit the bell, and hit the like button if you're getting something out of this thus far, because I'm actually going to be launching another video a couple down the line in this series that explains the difference between a gooseneck and a traditional kettle when I talk about more of the extra devices that I'll be using in this brewing process. Now, once all of that is set and I'm ready to go and I've started to pour my water in, I don't pour it all in to start. What I like to do is I like to pour it in just to where the water gets just above the grounds. And the reason that I do that is so that I can take a spoon, typically a longer spoon, a teaspoon, a tablespoon, doesn't really matter, whatever's going to keep your fingers safe. And I do a little stir. And I'm doing that stir to get all the grounds wet because I want to make sure that the coffee is completely infused. I don't want to leave any grounds unmoistened because that means that I'm potentially wasting coffee and nobody wants to do that. So once I've made sure that all the grounds are stirred in and I think that they're all covered with water, then I'll proceed to pour more of the water in until I get to my desired height inside of my French press. Once I've gotten to that point, I'll then take the lid and with the actual press arm all the way up, I'll then place the lid on top, making sure not to press down. And the reason is because I need to give this coffee some time to sit so that it completely infuses. I want to make sure that the water has a full time to completely infuse and extract the coffee from the grounds. That typically takes around 3.5 to 5 minutes. It's completely up to you and all depends on how strong or weak you'd like your coffee. If you want it a little bit weaker, then you let it sit for less time, maybe around 1.5 to 2 minutes. If you're a person who likes it really, really strong, then 3 to 5 minutes typically gets it pretty strong. But if you want it even stronger than that, you can let it sit 7-10 minutes. However much time you have is how long you can allow it to sit. Once it's set for an adequate amount of time and it meets whatever needs that you're wanting to fulfill with your coffee, you can go ahead and completely press that plunging arm down to make sure that it gets all the way down to its bottom, whatever its bottom is. Once it's there, you tip the French press up. Hopefully you have an arrow pointing you in the right direction. You tip the French press up, pour it in your cup, and enjoy your brew. So the French press is nice in that it's relatively quick to brew with. It's super duper easy to clean, in my opinion. And especially when you get one that has the parts that separate, it makes it a lot easier to clean, get the grounds out, and then prepare for your next brew. That's the French press. One of my go-tos. Easily the one I use the most. Next, we'll take a look at the AeroPress. Now, as I did a very brief demonstration before, I like to use the inverted method with the AeroPress. Honestly, there's no right or wrong way to do it. As long as you don't make a mess and you don't burn yourself, you're probably doing it right. For me, the inverted method works best because I have a little bit more control over where the coffee is going to go before I actually flip it into the mug. And that'll make more sense here momentarily. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll invert the press after I've gotten the plunger in and nice and level. I want to make sure it's level. Trust me, you do not want the coffee to leak out of the sides. It's a total nightmare and a mess. I would advise against it. Once you've made sure that it's level and you're ready to put your grounds in, that's what you do. You grab your coffee grounds and you just pour them in there. And then once they're in, I like to do a gentle tap to make sure that it's level. In most instances, when I'm brewing with any particular device, I like to make sure that it's level. So I would advise that you do that too, for nothing more that you get an even coverage of the water on your grounds. It's the best way to be able to control that and make sure that that's good. Once you give it a couple of gentle taps, now you'll want to do much like the French press and pour just a bit of water in to start the process of getting your grounds covered. And once you've gotten just over the top of getting them covered with your water, then you'll want to take a spoon. In my particular case, my device actually came with this interesting little spatula that says AeroPress on it. But whatever you get may vary depending on the version of the AeroPress, so I don't want to assume anything. If a spatula doesn't come with it, a teaspoon, tablespoon will work just fine. You want to give it a gentle stir just to make sure all of the grounds have been incorporated into the water. Once that's happened, get more of your water and pour it in until you hit the quantity that you want or the serving size that you're looking for out of your AeroPress. Once that's done, you're going to want to allow that to sit for, again, 2 to 3 minutes. A little longer if you want it a little stronger and extract. But I will say this, over extraction from time to time can lead to bitterness. So if you've set it down and allowed it to go for, I don't know, 3.5 or 4 minutes, and you find that that taste is a little bit bitter and it's not maybe like an espresso bean or something, and it's, let's just say it's outside of the normal flavor profile of coffee, then you might want to dial back on the time. But I like to do about 2 to 3 minutes. That's typically enough for me. Once it's had time to sit, I then take the cap with the filter in it. And please, please, please make sure your filter is in your cap before you do this, because when you flip it upside down, if it's not, you're going to have a complete mess on your hand and you're going to probably have a glass or a mug full of coffee grounds, and that's not anything that anybody wants. So make sure that your filter is in there. Whether it's the stainless steel version, the mesh version, or it's paper, doesn't matter either way. Quick little tip, if you're going to use the paper, you might want to moisten it just a bit before you put it in. It helps it to kind of adhere to the cap a little bit better as you flip it upside down. But if you don't, it's perfectly fine. Just make sure you have an even seal all the way around. Once that paper filter is in, or mesh filter, you'll want to take that and twist the cap on until it gives you some resistance. So you just want to make sure that it's on securely. Then you want to gently start to bring your plunger up, but you don't want the coffee to come out quite yet. And with this particular device, you'll want more medium to fine for your grounds, because it's going to give you the right amount of pressure and the right amount of pushback as you apply even pressure to get this down into your mug. But it's going to give you a little bit better infusion. So once all of that is set, you'll want to then invert the AeroPress onto your glass. So you'll want to have a glass or a mug very close to you, because you don't necessarily want to carry that around without having something to pour it into. And then once it's on top, you want to apply gentle's not the right word. You want to apply even. Even is the right word. You want to apply even pressure. You're going to feel some pushback. That's okay. That's a part of the experience. Don't super force it down. You want to keep it even and steady with the pressure until you get it all the way down to where it doesn't move anymore. Once you've done that, it actually forms this cool little coffee puck, and you can actually do one quick pop out and it makes it very, very easy to clean. Is it easier to clean than the French press? In my opinion, no, it's a little more difficult to clean, but not much more. And both methods will save you a little bit of time, all depending on what it is that you're brewing and how much actual time you have on your hands. So once that's done, the cool thing with the AeroPress is essentially you lift it off, probably invert it back so you don't have any coffee dripping all over the place. And then you just enjoy your coffee as opposed to having to pour it into something. You're essentially pouring it as you're pressing it. So hopefully you've taken a look at both of these techniques, both of these methods. I love them both, but I definitely spend more time using my French press. And if you're a French press gang, drop that down in the comments below. Let me know if you've gotten something out of this, and maybe it's you got introduced to a piece of hardware you weren't aware of before, or a new technique that you find interesting and want to try. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button and hit the bell button, because the next video in this series is going to deal with brewing methods that are pour over. One being the Chemex and the other being a Vietnamese coffee filter. They're very different in their form factors, and one might even argue in their brewing techniques. But I want to make sure that you're able to see those videos relatively quickly, because we're going to make sure that we move through this hardware so that as we start to test these different types of coffee, and we have some interesting ones to test, that we're not necessarily wasting time with these videos having to kind of explain all of the processes. I would rather you have the base knowledge and be able to refer back to these videos from time to time. So as you see me use one method or the other, you're completely aware of what I'm doing without having to ask a lot of questions or try to figure out, okay, how did he come to this conclusion? What did he do to get to this point? I want to make sure that I'm showing you the way that I'm actually brewing things on this particular journey. So I'm hoping that you learned something today, that you feel empowered somehow to use a new brewing technique to try at the house or at work, and that you feel like it's something that you could teach to someone else. And if you're having any challenges with teaching them, you can absolutely recommend they come and visit this channel, and I'll be glad to break it down for them. And hopefully at the end of all that, you would have been able to brew better. Peace.